This is Barry Zalma speaking for Claim School Incorporated's blog, Zalma on Insurance. Today we're going to talk a little bit about fraud and why when you sleep with dogs you wake with fleas. And if you are a doctor giving services to a person who staged a collision, you will probably not be paid. There are no PIP benefits in a no-fault state available for a staged collision. An insurer proved that it was faced with claims for injuries from staged accidents. The medical care providers of the fraud perpetrators who claimed to be injured in the staged accidents claimed a right to be paid for their services to the supposedly injured parties. The insurer disagreed. In National General Insurance versus Franklin Blasco et al., AB Medical Supply, and other medical providers, a November 9, 2022 decision of the Supreme Court of New York, Second Department, the appellate court dealt with an action for a judgment declaring that the plaintiffs are not obligated to pay certain no-fault claims to the defendants, AB Medical Supply, and all of the other medical providers to the fraud perpetrators. The judgment granting that branch of the plaintiff's motion, which was for summary judgment on the complaint insofar as asserted against those defendants, declared that the plaintiffs have no duty to provide coverage for the subject no-fault claims. In April of 2017 and June of 2017, within days of the defendants Jerry Nolan and Franklin Blasco procuring automobile insurance policies, the vehicles for which the policies were issued were involved in two separate automobile collisions when they each came in contact with two separate taxicabs. The insurer was suspicious, investigated, and established that the accidents were staged. In or around April of 2018, the plaintiff's National General sued Nolan, Blasco, and other individuals involved in the collisions, as well as, among others, the defendant medical providers, alleging the collisions were intentional and the insurers owed nothing. After the Supreme Court, the trial court in New York, granted the plaintiff's motion for leave to enter a default judgment against the individuals involved in the two collisions, the plaintiffs moved for summary judgment on the complaint insofar as asserted against the medical provider defendants, arguing that they were not obligated to pay no-fault claims submitted to them by the medical provider defendants in connection with the staged collisions. The Supreme Court granted that motion. A judgment was entered on November 13, 2019, and the medical provider defendants appealed. The medical provider defendants failed, however, to sustain the burden of demonstrating that the branch of the plaintiff's motion, which was for summary judgment on the complaint insofar as asserted against them, was premature. Further, and what should be obvious, an intentional and staged collision caused in furtherance of an insurance fraud scheme is not a covered accident under a policy of insurance under New York law or the law of any state. Here the plaintiffs established their prima facie entitlement to a judgment as a matter of law by demonstrating through admissible evidence that the subject collisions were intentionally caused or staged. The medical provider defendants failed to raise a triable issue of fact. Accordingly, the Supreme Court properly granted that branch of the plaintiff's motion, which was for summary judgment on the complaint insofar as asserted against the medical provider defendants. In my opinion, National General has adopted one of the most, if not the most effective method of deterring or defeating insurance fraud. They took the profit out of the crime. By suing both the fraud perpetrators and the so-called medical providers who allegedly provided medical services to the fraudsters, they avoided paying anyone who participated in the fraud and made it known to the community of fraudsters and those who provide alleged medical services to fraudsters that National General is not an insurer worthy of the effort to defraud, and they will find themselves suffering much fewer fraud attempts. This video was adapted from my blog, Zelma on Insurance, which is available free to anyone who clicks on the link zelma.com/blog. You can subscribe to the blog and you'll be told about every blog posting, usually at least 5 a week. And you can also view these videos on rumble.com and youtube.com. And if you do, I'd appreciate your clicking on the like button or the rumble button, depending on which video service you use. Please also subscribe to the videos so you don't miss any of them. And I'd appreciate it if you found this video to be useful or interesting. Tell your colleagues about it so that they can also subscribe. Thank you for your attention. And also, please consider my locals community and my Substack publication.